More backlash over religious freedom and gender identity. Bruce Springsteen and Bryan Adams cancel concerts as supporters say new state laws uphold common sense. Growing battle on the campaign trail. Donald Trump's criticism of Republican rules. Terror investigation. What police are learning about the threat of future attacks. Vatican leaks. An inside look at the trial, complete with today's testimony. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, April 11th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us this third week of Easter. I'm Brian Patrick. Supporters of North Carolina's so-called bathroom bill rally today. The law facing growing pressure from corporate America and now the music industry. Catherine Szeltner reports.
Now there's a dark cloud rising from a desert floor.
Bruce Springsteen fans will get a refund after the recording artist canceled his North Carolina show. Springsteen said he's protesting the state's House Bill 2, which requires residents to use public bathrooms based on their biological sex. Supporters call it common sense.
We're passing legislation to protect women and girls, and that's really the bottom line.
But a growing number of corporations claim it's discrimination against transgender residents. They are threatening to pull out of North Carolina if the bill isn't repealed.
Companies that choose not to do business in North Carolina are only doing that to their own detriment. We are consistently in the top 5 states in which to do business for job creation and economic growth.
The irony is these businesses are free to continue operating exactly as they've always operated in North Carolina.
Policy expert Peter Sprigg says the so-called bathroom bill doesn't impact private corporations, only government buildings. He thinks companies won't leave the state. They're just paying lip service to push an agenda.
You basically have a liberal movement that is trying to make it illegal for people to express and act upon traditional beliefs.
About 500 people rallied in North Carolina's capital today in support of the bill. The crowd included Christian leaders who say they are under attack.
There is an all-out assault on people of faith in order to basically push us back into the box and say, be quiet, hush, your opinions don't count.
Today's protest is one of the largest rallies backing House Bill 2. There have also been smaller prayer vigils in several cities to support the law getting enacted. Brian.
Thank you, Catherine Szeltner. And the fight over religious freedom extends to Mississippi. Musician Bryan Adams canceled his upcoming concert in Biloxi. He says he believes the state's new law could lead to discrimination against gay people. The law that takes effect July 1st is designed to protect people who believe in marriage between one man and one woman. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The Zika virus is expected to hit the U.S. this summer and may be scarier than originally thought. White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn has that story along with a campaign update. Lauren?
Brian, 2 top health officials came to the White House today to sound the alarm over the spread of the Zika virus. They say there's more evidence that the virus goes straight to the brain.
The more and more we learn, the more and more you get concerned about the scope of what this virus is doing. Bottom line is we still have a lot to learn.
Dr. Fauci is the National Institute of Health's top infectious diseases leader. He and Dr. Ann Schuchat of the Centers for Disease Control say the number of states where the virus-spreading mosquito lives has more than doubled. Zika affects pregnant women and their unborn babies, and officials believe $1.9 billion requested by President Obama is needed from Congress for things like Zika prevention kits. The kits, including condoms, are being handed out in locations hardest hit, like Puerto Rico.
Is there abstinence information in the Zika kits?
The guidance that we've issued for pregnant women and for couples in terms of preventing the sexual spread of Zika virus include both condoms and abstinence. The actual wording in the materials for Puerto Rico I'm not sure of, because I know we were doing focus testing for the appropriate way to message.
Health officials are recommending that pregnant women and those planning to become pregnant should not travel to Brazil for the upcoming Summer Olympics. They also say anyone in Zika-affected countries should be tested when they return to the U.S. Meanwhile, outside the White House this morning, a disability group tells us the White House is doing more for the LBGT community than they are for them. The activist group is called ADAPT. They say they asked the Obama administration for help last year for improvements in living conditions at nursing homes. And it wants more options from Medicaid so disabled people can afford more suitable housing.
Right now, people with disabilities, if they need assistance, can get that immediately by going into a nursing facility. But people die early there, their rights are violated.
Many told us they'd rather die than live in a nursing home. In the race for the White House this weekend, Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders hit Hillary Clinton hard over her qualifications for president, while Republican frontrunner Donald Trump continues to call the delegate system crooked and corrupt. Ted Cruz has been upfront about his strategy to get the nomination at the Republican National Convention in July.
It's going to be a battle in Cleveland to see who can earn a majority of the delegates.
Cruz's strength in the delegate game has helped him in Colorado, Louisiana, Tennessee, and North Dakota. But Trump's new convention manager says it's not about organization, but dirty tricks, threatening delegates to change their vote to Cruz.
You go to these county conventions and you see the Gestapo tactics, the scorched earth tactics.
Gestapo tactics?
They are.
That's a strong word.
Well, you look at, we're going to be filing several protests because the reality is they are not playing by the rules.
The comment raised eyebrows, but a Republican strategist says this rhetoric is standard for the Trump campaign.
Anytime he loses delegates, it's not because he didn't have the organization on the ground. It's because somebody else is stealing them from him.
But at a campaign stop in New York on Sunday, Trump issued a warning.
And I say this to the RNC and I say it to the Republican Party. You're going to have a big problem, folks, because there are people that don't like what's going on.
Earlier today, Trump told the media that 2 of his children feel guilty they did not switch their New York State party registrations from Democrat to Republican. They will be unable to vote for him in next week's New York primary. Trump quipped that it's fine, but that he's cutting off their allowance. Brian?
Thanks, Lauren Ashburn. And major European cities are on alert this week, concerned about a new round of terror attacks. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Investigators in Brussels now know more about last month's terror attacks in Belgium. Police launched a new raid on what was thought to be a terrorist safe house. No weapons or explosives were found Saturday, but on Friday, 6 people were arrested in connection with the suicide bombings in Brussels, which killed 32 people at the airport and on the subway system. One of those is Mohamed Abrini, who admitted to being the 3rd suspect seen on surveillance video at the Brussels airport. Abrini is also a suspect in the November Paris attacks, working closely with another suspect, Salah Abdeslam. Security experts say police in Belgium and France should be on high alert.
Every one of their intelligence, particularly their human intelligence agencies, should not be sleeping at night because that's the way they're going to find and predict future attacks.
Prosecutors say the terrorist cell was planning to attack Paris again, but the arrests of key members like Abdeslam forced them to strike closer to home in Belgium. A French news station reports that Belgian authorities found a laptop last month that lists a number of potential Paris targets, including a Euro soccer tournament and an unnamed Catholic association. Belgium's prime minister admits it's easy in Europe to travel between countries to organize attacks.
It means that we have to work better with our partners, of course, but we have also to upgrade our capacities for the security.
Despite multiple arrests and ongoing police raids, Brussels is still considered to be a likely location for a terrorist attack. The Belgian Interior Minister says there could be more cells that are still active in his country. Brian?
Very troubling. Thank you, Wyatt. And Pope Francis appeals for the immediate release of kidnapped Salesian Father Tom Zunalil. He was captured March 4th by terrorists who raided a home for the elderly in Yemen, that home run by the Missionaries of Charity. 4 religious sisters of that congregation, founded by Blessed Mother Teresa, were slain. A dozen other people at the home were also killed in that attack. Pope Francis will visit Armenia in June and travel to Georgia and Azerbaijan in the fall. Orthodox church leaders invited the Holy Father to visit. Francis is working steadily to improve Catholic-Orthodox relations. It's a volatile region. The Pope hopes to carry a message of peace there. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan addresses men studying in Iraq's only remaining seminary for diocesan priests. He urged them not to give in to the idea that the church is dying in the Middle East. You will be the apostles, you will be the heralds, you will help convert the world, Dolan told them in Erbil on Saturday. Cardinal Dolan leads a delegation of Americans visiting northern Iraq as chair of the Catholic Near East Welfare Association. A secretary on trial in the leaks of confidential Vatican documents testifies in court today. He says he felt compelled to do what his boss wanted because the Monsignor reported directly to the Pope. EWTN News Nightly producer Mary Shovlain was in the Vatican courtroom today and joins us now from Rome.
Good evening, Brian. That's right. Today we heard from Mr. Maio. He was the secretary to the Monsignor who is behind bars here in Vatican City. He worked directly for the Monsignor who reported directly, according to Mr. Maio, to the Holy Father. So in a certain sense, he felt a lot of pressure to do whatever was asked of him by his boss in that case. But also in the line of questioning, it came out that he did not leak those documents to the journalists who went on to publish those books that detailed what they called greed and mismanagement and waste by the Vatican's financial institutions. So he detailed the pressure he was under, but he said that pressure did not lead him to leak those documents to the press.
So, Mary, what's next as this trial continues?
It's hard to say where we go from here, Brian, because all we know is that the next hearing will be on Wednesday. In that case, one of the Italian journalists accused of publishing books based on this leaked documentation, these books that have turned into blockbusters, he will be having his say during questioning on Wednesday. That's at 10:30 a.m. here in the Vatican. But beyond that, we don't know when this trial is set to end and how much longer this may go on. But all of these people on trial, all 5 of them, face up to 8 years in prison if convicted.
Thank you, Mary Shovlain in Rome. And the World Food Program airdrops supplies to people trapped by fighting in Syria. One community in eastern Syria has been under siege for 2 years. It's nearly impossible for food trucks to get to the people who live there. The UN agency dropped about 24 pallets of food using parachutes. The beans, chickpeas, and rice can feed 2,500 people for a month.
This is an area that is controlled by ISIS. There's a city of 200,000 people who are stuck there. It's impossible for us to get our trucks in the usual way. And it's one of many besieged areas in Syria, some besieged by one side, some from the other side.
This is the second attempt at a high-altitude drop for the agency. In February, technical problems caused some of the pallets to miss the drop zone. Also, some of the parachutes failed to open. Coming up, violence against Christians, unique problems facing people in Mexico, and royal visit. Prince William and Duchess Kate make a special trip to India. Pope Francis reminds us to be open to God's word and not let our hearts be closed. During this morning's Mass at Casa Santa Marta, where the Pope lives, he encouraged everyone to seek God's guidance and avoid being judgmental. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. An Australian lab says it finds no evidence yet that hair and other remains belong to 43 students who disappeared in Mexico in 2014. That lab continues its testing. That kidnapping is part of a growing threat to people in Mexico, as Jason Calvi reports tonight from the capital.
Last year alone, there were 27,000 disappearances of people that the Mexican government has absolutely no idea what happened to them.
Ana Quintana briefs staffers on Capitol Hill and in the State Department about grave human rights abuses in Mexico.
I think it's over 90-something% of murders in Mexico go completely uninvestigated and unsolved.
And Catholic priests have faced violence at the hands of Mexico's drug cartels.
11 priests have been killed in the last 3 years.
The Catholic Multimedia Center estimates 500 priests are under threat right now.
Sometimes the criminal groups want to use the church as a front for money laundering. So they approach the priest and say, you're going to work with us, and if you don't, these are the consequences.
Today, these groups are asking the U.S. government to use their power to fight the violence.
And the experts I spoke with say the key really is improving Mexico's justice system. They're hoping Congress can push for that moving forward. Now, this fall, the Pope will be canonizing a victim of Mexican persecution against religious faith. You may remember from the movie For Greater Glory, the killing of a 14-year-old martyr. His last words, Viva Cristo Rey. Brian?
Great courage. Thank you. Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. John Kerry becomes the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Hiroshima. That, of course, is the Japanese city where the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb in 1945 to hasten the end of World War II.
It is a stunning display. It is a gut-wrenching display. It tugs at all of your sensibilities as a human being.
Kerry and other G7 foreign members or foreign ministers visited the Hiroshima Peace Memorial. They placed wreaths commemorating the many who died as a result of that bombing. Pope Francis and the bishops of India say they are praying for the victims of a Hindu temple fire. The blaze killed at least 100 people and injured more than 300. Thousands had gathered in the temple for a religious festival. Investigators say an illegal fireworks show sparked the fire. They are now searching for suspects. This tragedy comes as India hosts members of the British royal family. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge today visited a war memorial in New Delhi. It honors Indian soldiers who died in World War I. William and Kate also paid respects to Mahatma Gandhi and toured a museum near the spot where he was assassinated. They plan to attend an evening garden party celebrating Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday, which is later this month. Catholics worldwide are absorbing the Pope's newest document on marriage and family life. Amoris Laetitia, or Joy of Love, came out on Friday. It is the fruit of nearly 3 years of dialogue with Catholic leaders and lay people. Father Dominic Leg, an instructor of systematic theology at the Dominican House of Studies here in D.C., is with us. Father, this document hits a lot of hot-button issues, but what would you say is the central message?
Well, Pope Francis, in issuing the document, is following up on 2 synods on the family, and the goal is really to strengthen families and to encourage people in the proclamation of the Church's message of the gospel for families. So interestingly, even though a lot of attention has been paid to more controversial issues that hit the popular secular media, the opening paragraphs of the document say this about the central point. It represents an invitation to families to value the gifts of marriage and family. That's the first point he makes. And secondly, to persevere in a love strengthened by the virtues of generosity, commitment, fidelity, and patience. And that's really the gospel message. Be faithful to the call of Christ, be faithful to the vows that we've made. This produces the joy of love in the family.
Do you see the door opened at all to communion for the married or the divorced and remarried?
Well, this is the big question that a lot of people have been asking when they read the document, but it's very important to note that it actually doesn't say that it's opening the door to that. So obviously everyone has had this question on their minds. The Pope was very careful in the way he presented the issue. And the way he laid it out is by reiterating the teaching of the Church, the traditional teaching of the Church, as reiterated by John Paul II and Benedict XVI, about the need for people to be in a state of grace to approach Holy Communion, and the fact that there is no such thing as Catholic divorce. Marriage is permanent. It's a permanent commitment. And in light of that, then he presents some various factors by which we might say certain people might be in a difficult situation and calls for them to examine their consciences.
Yeah, and he gets into personal and pastoral discernment. Does that put too much pressure on pastors?
Well, I think it is interesting that it does shift a heavy burden to pastors in these conversations. In a way, I think the right way to read this document is with a hermeneutic of continuity, reading it in the context of the Church's teaching on marriage and family and on the Eucharist, on the Sacrament of Penance. Those teachings say that you have to make, for example, a complete and integral confession before going to receive Holy Communion. And that remains the teaching of the Church. Francis is certainly repeating that and supporting that. So what is an individual priest to do? You have, on the one hand, the objective teaching of the Church, and Amoris Laetitia repeats that, quotes the Catechism over and over on those points, and then an examination of what is the real state of this person who is concretely coming to the priest asking for guidance. And I think the role of the priest is to encourage someone like that, to help engage in a discernment of conscience, and then to conform their life to the teaching of the Church.
Well, we pray for our priests who will be given this responsibility. Father Dominic Leg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, a couple shares strategy for a joy-filled marriage, how their example could help others, and an honor for the Little Sisters of the Poor. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. A new Pew study tracks Americans' views on abortion. 56% of Americans now believe abortion should be legal in most cases. 41% believe it should be illegal. Despite church teaching, Catholics only show up as slightly more pro-life. 54% of Catholics polled support abortion, 42% oppose it. White evangelicals appear to be the most pro-life. Only 29% favor legal abortion. 69% say it should be illegal in all or most cases. The Little Sisters of the Poor received recognition for contributing to a culture of life. Notre Dame's Evangelium Vitae Award was presented Saturday in South Bend to Mother Provincial Sister Lorraine Marie McGuire. In making the presentation, the director of Notre Dame's Center for Ethics and Culture says the sisters offer a beautiful and powerful witness to the unique, inviolable dignity of every person from conception to natural death. The specially commissioned medal is accompanied by a cash award of $10,000. Well, the Pope's newly released document, The Joy of Life, can serve as a valuable resource for strengthening marriages. Greg and Julie Alexander, founders of the Alexander House, are Skyping with us from San Antonio. Their center offers tools for living a joy-filled marriage. I wonder if you might give us some practical takeaways from this document on how to improve marriage.
Yes, the first point I'd like to bring up, Brian, is really coming to understand what love is. You know, a lot of times we're under the misconception that love has everything to do with a feeling, but of course it doesn't. And love is literally that ability to die to oneself for the sake of the beloved. So therefore, either foregoing things that I like to do, but doing for the beloved, or doing things that I don't like to do, but also doing for the beloved. And when we really come to understand what that love really is and begin to do those things, the byproduct, if you will, are the feelings. So love in and of itself is not the feeling, but it's what we choose to do on a daily basis that demonstrates love to each other.
Julie, how's Greg doing with that?
He's doing great. He's sitting right here next to me. Because of the second point what we were talking about in this document, it's so critically mentioned, and yet people don't understand how important it is. But forgiveness, you know, forgiveness is one of the number one issues and topics that we need to discuss, because every day we do something to offend the other person, or we're not perfect people. You know, it didn't take us too long after we got married, maybe 5 minutes after, we married a sinner, and all of us are sinners. So we need to learn the art of forgiveness, which brings in healing. But too often in marriages, we hold on to things and we can't understand then why we can't get along 5-10 years down the road.
Can the church do better with marriage preparation than it has?
Oh, I believe so, Brian. In fact, we always go back and point out the fact that marriage preparation is not that 48-hour engaged encounter session or those 6 to 8 sponsor couple sessions. Marriage preparation indeed begins in the home. So it's our responsibilities as husband and wife, as those primary educators, to be able to teach our children about love, the faith, the sacraments, but more importantly in this case, marriage. We are our children's marriage preparation. So therefore, if we do our job, it'll make the church's job a lot easier in affirming what it is that our kids should have learned at home.
So Julie, will you be using this document in the work that you do there at the Alexander House?
We love that this document came out, actually, because it's what we've already been doing to try to get couples to understand what is God's plan for marriage. You know, we asked that simple question, and honestly, Brian, it said most people don't know that he has a plan. And just like us, when you don't have an understanding of God's plan for marriage, you cannot possibly live it out. So this document has been a blessing to us because it just affirms what we've been doing for the past 18 years and really getting couples to understand we got to work at our marriages. You know, it just doesn't just happen. It's something we need to put our effort and our strength and our everything we've got into it, because you get out of marriage what you put into it.
Greg and Julie Alexander by Skype from San Antonio. Thank you both.
Hey, thank you, Brian.
So much.
Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless.